We are gathered here today to celebrate the life of Beatrice BeDe and to mourn our loss at her death. We'll begin with the refrain of a Jewish cultural song that I sang BeDe many times. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the day. Seedlings turn overnight to sunflowers, blossoming even as we gaze. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years. One season following another, laden with happiness and tears. And I'm going to read a poem called Life is a Journey by Rabbi Alvin Klein that really speaks to Judy. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey, from childhood to maturity, and youth to age, from innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or from strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, from grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until, not looking backwards or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high point along the way, but in having made the journey step by step, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey. BeDe did a lot of journeying in her 107 years, and what follows is from an overview of her life by her daughter Judy, with excerpts from a eulogy her grandson Jeffrey wrote, as well as from a school paper he wrote as a child after interviewing BeDe. BeDe was born Beatrice Sylvia Brofman to Pauline and Jacob Brofman on June 12, 1913 in St. Paul, Minnesota. She spent her early years in Regent, North Dakota, riding horses, racing the stagecoach with her older sisters Gertrude and Helen, feeding the chickens, walking to school with her pet geese, and playfully getting into trouble with her cat in the family general store. She lived in a time of gas lanterns and fireplaces, outhouses, and big barn dances, where she learned how to walk, taught by her father. Her mother slept with a rifle under her pillow to ward off wolves, and her family regularly sold, that is, gave food to the Sioux on credit, which they knew would never be paid back. And now I'm going to read from Jeffrey's school paper, which he entitled Different Lives of Beatrice Dick. When my grandma was a girl, she had 3 pet geese. Quoting her, "I had a mother goose, a father goose, and a baby goose. My family of geese would walk up and down the street of my parents' general merchandise store. My geese were the talk of the town." Unquote. Living in a small town meant that everybody knew each other's names, and everybody was a friend. Every Saturday night, there would always be a big dance at Town Hall. An entire family would go to dances. Quote from BeDe, "The kids and infants were always falling asleep on the straight-back chairs, while the mothers and fathers would dance in the middle of the room. The music that people danced to was often polkas and waltzes. Everyone was a terrific dancer, including me." Unquote. My grandma lived without running water, so bath time would come once per week on Saturday night. My grandma would use a large galvanized round tub filled with hot water. Next to the tub was a round belly-type stove in the living room. Sometimes when my grandma was through with her bath, or sometimes at midnight when the coal of the stove in the living room was just right, my great-grandfather would place steaks on the coal and broil them. At 1 o'clock in the morning, my grandma's family would have steak, and in BeDe's words, and boy, they were delicious. age 13, returning to Judy's summary, at age 13, BeDe literally drove across country to Santa Monica with her father jumping out to crank up the car. The family kept some roots in North Dakota, having purchased several farmlands with mineral rights. Her parents started the first cut-rate pharmacy in Santa Monica, selling medications and cosmetics during the glamour days of Hollywood to all the big stars. Shirley Temple Black adopted BeDe's family. As BeDe wore her high heels and gowns to the Academy Awards, she gave away toothbrushes and toothpaste to poor kids, charging everything to her father's drugstore without asking permission. Ironically, she graduated from USC in finance and social work. BeDe danced to the music of all the big jazz bands and met her much-adored husband, Albert Dick, or Alan. After a whirlwind romance and marriage, her husband went to and returned from World War II, having fought in England, Germany, and Egypt. During the war, BeDe worked as an executive secretary to one of the heads of Lockheed, who begged her not to quit. Together, Alan and BeDe produced their two children, Judy and Michael, of whom she was very proud. BeDe was active in her kids' PTAs, schools, and sporting events, and was a pushy stage mother to her daughter, Judy. BeDe saw to it that Judy performed and studied acting, dancing, singing with and under Hollywood's greatest. She also supported her son in his obtaining a third-degree black belt in karate. Later in life, she played just as active a role in her grandson Jeffrey's life and education, making sure that both of her children and her grandson became professionals. As Jeffrey wrote in his eulogy of BeDe, when it came to stories of World War II hardships, she did not dwell for long on the pain she surely felt for these losses, at least not when speaking to me. When she had complaints, they were more focused on present concerns, like my misbehavior or my mom's budgeting, or how much she wished her husband had been alive to see the incredible technology that has become part of our daily lives. Above all else, she was affectionate and generous to me. Even when pointing out the things she was proud of, my grandmother was modest when speaking about her own accomplishments. By comparison, she was effusive when it came to the accomplishments of my grandfather, my mother, or my uncle. She rarely failed to remind me of my intelligence and good looks. I tried to remind her that I had inherited those traits from her, along with a great sense of humor. Returning to BeDe's life story, she wanted to go back to work and became the head of credit checking for Wells Fargo Bank in Beverly Hills, again enjoying the stars as clients. She remained an active Democrat and fought against injustices by exposing them to a television commentator. Having a true romance with her husband, she was always happy, positive, and excited by life, receiving letters of accommodations and success in all of her jobs and roles. As Judy wrote, mainly, she was a cross between a true Martha Stewart and a Jewish mother, sewing clothes, decorating cakes, arranging flowers, cooking, and entertaining. On turning 107, after flirting with two handsome young men, BeDe announced, "Isn't life grand? All of it." And in Jeffrey's words, BeDe's life signifies the realization of the American dream. With my grandfather, she ensured the survival of the Jewish people through several more generations. To the many friends, acquaintances, colleagues, clients, and extended family whose lives she enriched over 107 years of vibrant life, she has meant more than I can ever know, and more than she herself could modestly appreciate. We can therefore let my grandmother rest, knowing that she practiced tzedakah, righteous giving, in her life, and convinced that she honored her ancestors through her resilience and loving kindness towards others. And now Judy will come up and read a poem that she wrote about her mother.
BeDe. Who was she? She is the last key to my childhood, which she witnessed and we shared. She is a mother we are always trying to figure out. She is history. She is ruled by determinations, by love, by fears, by rules. Her melodies were from the 40s. Her memories from North Dakota, glamour of Hollywood, and courtships. She is a wife, her love was for my dad and family and friends. Textured by complexity, moved by music and romance, she gives way to nervous intensity, rhythms and moods of urgency. You rebel, you reject, and then you wonder. Unexpectedly, another movement with another beat. She never gave up on life.
Thank you, Judy. I know all of you will be sharing memories of BeDe for the rest of your lives. Her death is mourned by her daughter Judy, son Michael, grandson Jeffrey, cousins, friends, and staff at the Redwoods, and caregivers Edna, Heidi, Mergie, Josephine, Rosalind, Gladys, Anna, and Joy, who was with BeDe at the very end of her life, along with her daughter Judy.
And Delana.
And Elena.
Delana.
In a few minutes, I'll be chanting a prayer in which we ask that BeDe's soul be bound up in the bonds of the living. But that prayer has already been answered. BeDe is bound up in the bonds of our lives, in the way that her life touched each of ours. Her memory is a blessing. Now I'll be singing and reading a few Jewish prayers. The first is the 23rd Psalm. The imagery of this psalm is of God as a shepherd, guiding us even through the valley of the shadow of death. Per Judy's preference, I will just be singing the Hebrew. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo etzah, Ino tesheyar b'tzeni, Amei menuchot yenaleini, Nafshi yeshover, Nafshi yeshover, Yancheni b'ma'aglei tzedek, L'man shemo, Yam yelech, B'geitz ha'mavet, Lo yirara, Ki ata imadi, Shiftecha, Umishantecha, Shiftecha umishantecha, Hema yenachamoni, Taroch lefanai shulchan, Taroch lefanai shulchan, Taroch lefanai shulchan, Neged sorerai, Dishanta v'Hashem em roshi, Dishanta v'Hashem em roshi, Dishanta v'Hashem em roshi, Kosi revaya, Achto v'chesed, Irdefuni, Kol yemei hayai, V'shavti b'veit Adonai, V'shavti b'veit Adonai, Le'orech yamim. The next prayer that I will be chanting is the El Mali Rachamim prayer. It's the Jewish memorial prayer. El Mali Rachamim literally means God full of compassion. And this is a prayer in which we ask God full of compassion to find a place of perfect peace in God's sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to BeDe's soul. And we also ask God to bind up her soul and the bond of life. And of course, she's so much bound up in all of your lives. It is traditional to stand for this prayer. Please rise in body or in spirit. Spirit is fine.
Thank you.
El male rachamim shochen bamromim Amsei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina B'malot kedoshim u'tehorim Gezor harakia mazirim Et nishmat BeDe bat Palim v'Yaakov she'alcha le'olama V'gan Eden tehei menuchata Ana bal harachamim Asireha b'sefer kenatzecha le'olamim Utzror b'tzror hachayim et nishmata Adonai hu nachalata V'tanuach v'shalom al mishkava V'nomar, and we say Amen. The next prayer that we will be saying is the Mourner's Kaddish. This is a prayer in which we honor BeDe's life by praising the source of life. It is traditional to stand for this prayer, so again, please rise in body or in spirit. And one thing I want to mention, in this prayer, we honor BeDe's life by praising the source of life. And the intention is that we're honoring. It's not meant to be a challenge to say this prayer. This prayer was written in Aramaic, which at the time was the language that Jews spoke. So it was familiar to people. Please don't. So you're welcome to say this prayer using all the words of the prayer, or there's another equally valid way, which is that there are 4 places in this prayer we'll say Amen. When we say Amen, it is virtually the same as having said the entire prayer. So please join in whatever way feels easier. The Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. V'yalma divrach Yerusei v'yamlich malchusei. V'chayehon v'yomechon v'chaye b'kol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'yimeru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lamei amayim. Yitbarach v'yistabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitomam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yit'alav shemei kudisha v'yitchol le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata v'ushbachata v'nechemata da'miran v'yalma v'yimru. Amen. Yehei shmama Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, and we say Amen. Please be seated. So I'm going to sing a song now that probably isn't familiar. This song was actually adapted from a Sufi song into Jewish, and so the second part of the song uses the words Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom, which is how Jews used to greet each other and part from each other in the old country. Literally means peace on you, in response on you, peace. I love this song for this kind of a context because everything repeats. So it feels to me like if you were going to be having a conversation with BeDe right now, with her soul, her essence, whatever you actually said, this in my mind would probably be the subtext, the meta, the overriding meaning of what you were saying. All I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you. All I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you. Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem, Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem, Shalom. All I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you. All I ask of you is forever to remember me as loving you. Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem, Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem, Shalom. For those of you watching this video later on, I wish you the comfort of many beautiful memories of BeDe and of knowing how much you meant to her. This concludes the service.